Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Undiscovered Games video podcast, where we take a look at the lesser known board games of the world and share those with you. Today I'm going to do a full review and tutorial of a very unknown trading game called OLTRE MARE. This came out in 2004, almost 20 years ago, from Rio Grande and Amigo, designed by an Italian game designer known as Emanuele Ornella. This is a bartering, trading, card-based game. It's essentially a card game, but there is this big board of the Mediterranean region, and you have these really cool 3D boats that you get to sail around the region from port to port, collecting these tiles, which will just help you be more efficient on your turns. But like I said, essentially you're bartering with each other, trying to collect sets of goods at certain moments in the game. It's all about the timing and the order in which you collect these sets of goods. So it has set collection with a little bit of a timing element to it. It also has bartering, trading, lots of great player interaction here, and it uses some really clever ideas that I have not seen used in many other board games. Obviously, the trading for goods does remind me a little bit of Catan, but it's still a vastly different game from Catan. I would say the game reminds me more, actually, of Bohnanza, the bean trading game, where you're trying to barter with each other, get beans, and plant them in your fields, because it has that timing element to when you collect these goods. But I don't want to compare this too much to other games, because OLTRE MARE has its own unique identity, and that's why I like it so much, and that's why I'm featuring it here today on my channel. So join me as I will teach you the game, as well as continue to talk about the game. And as always, make sure you check the description below for any rules clarifications or maybe mistakes that I may have made. I try to make these tutorials as clean and mistake-free as possible, but sometimes I do miss something, so make sure you read the description for any clarifications. Let's learn how to play OLTRE MARE. So put the board in the center of the table, and then you're going to give each player some materials in their color. You're going to get a cube, a boat, and a player reference guide in your color. Place your cube on the 11 space of the ducat track here. Ducats are your money, which is also your victory points. That's a very interesting idea in this game, because anytime you spend money, you're spending straight victory points. I really like that, by the way. These player reference sheets are very handy, and then your boat is going to stay off the board for now, but we're going to put it on the board here shortly. I will say the boat colors are a little bit hard to see. That's one minor gripe I have with the components, but the boats look really cool. I love the way these look on the table. After you have all your materials, you're going to take these little circular harbor tiles and mix them all face down and place one on each harbor out on the board. Make sure that you don't look at these while you do this, and then once the board is seated, put the remaining harbor tokens back in the box and then flip all of these face up. So now you can look and see what's out on the board. I'll go over what these little harbor tiles mean later. Find these little negative markers, place these near the board somewhere. These are just going to track in case your money cube ever dips below zero. Like if you need to spend more money than you have, you just take this little negative marker to show that you are in the negative. And then once your cube comes back over zero, you just put this back in the supply. So it's just a little tracker. You're going to find these prestige tiles, place these next to the board within easy reach of everybody. And finally, you're going to find this Venice card here. Keep this out of the deck, because we're going to shuffle this deck here in a minute, but you do not want to shuffle in the Venice card just yet. And one little side note, if you're playing this with two players, make sure you go through this deck of cards and remove all the grain cards from the game. So any card with this grain symbol, just put it back in the box if you're playing with two players. Otherwise, you're going to use every card in this deck. And that's what we're going to do next. We're going to shuffle this deck, and we're going to determine where your starting harbor is, so where you're going to start your boat on this map. First, you have to determine a start player however you see fit and give them this start player marker, and then start flipping cards from this deck until you see a card with a harbor on the bottom here. Not all the cards have a harbor name, so say the yellow player is going first, you just flip over cards. Here's a harbor. The yellow starts here. You're going to remove this token from the game. You don't get this right away. So wherever your ship starts, you have to take that token out of the game. And then you're going to keep the card that had your harbor on it. So whichever harbor you started on, take that card, put it in front of you face up. This is called your freight deck, and you're going to be stacking cards on this face up for the rest of the game. Now you're going to repeat this process with each player going clockwise around the table. Continue revealing cards from this deck until you get a harbor. Place the player's boat on that harbor and remove that token from the game. And don't forget to give each player their starting card face up in front of them. The last thing for setup is just to take all these revealed cards here from setup and mix them back into this deck. So just shuffle this deck all back together, give it a good mix. Each player is now going to draw 4 cards off the top of this deck. That's going to be their starting hand. And then you're going to find this Venice card. This should have been set aside at the beginning, and you're just going to place this somewhere in the center of this deck. Just approximate the middle point, and this is going to determine the mid-game scoring. So we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but when this Venice card comes up, we're going to pause the game game and do a mid-game scoring, and I'll talk more about that here in a moment. So now you're ready to play OLTRE MARE. So starting with that start player, make sure they have the start player marker in front of them. Your turn is going to consist of 4 steps, and they're very simple, and they're the same 4 steps every time. Step 1, you check your hand limit, discard cards if you're over your hand limit. Step 2 is trading, buying, and bartering with your opponents. That's how you get more cards into your hand. Step 3 is your actions. That's when you play a certain number of action cards from your hand to the table, carry out the actions, and then you proceed to step 4, which is taking those action cards that you played and stacking them on your freight deck in a specific order, which I will talk more about in a moment. Then you're just going to pass the start player marker to the player to your left. Start player always rotates clockwise around the table, and then the player to your left is just going to do those same 4 steps. The game continues like this until we hit that Venice card halfway through the deck. We're going to do a mid-game scoring, and then you're going to continue the game again for the second half of the deck until this deck runs out, at which point we will do a final scoring. So let's talk more about the 4 steps that you do on your turn in more detail so you can understand more about the strategies and what you're trying to accomplish. And I will say this game is really easy to learn because you're doing those same 4 steps over and over and over again. So, after a couple turns, you're going to really know every rule in the game, but then you can really dive in and explore the different strategies because there is some complexity to your strategy. So let's talk about these steps. Step 1 is checking your hand limit. The rulebook calls this navigation power. And the way you do this is you're going to look at the cards that you have in your hand, and you're going to look at the topmost card on your freight deck. There's going to be a lion here at the top with a number. That is your hand limit. So you only check your hand limit at the beginning of your turn. If you have more cards in your hand than is showing on that lion number, you have to discard them face down in front of you. You get to choose which cards you discard. So let's say you had 8 cards in your hand and the lion said 6. You immediately discard 2 cards. You get to choose which 2 cards you discard, and you place them face down in front of you in any order you choose. And this is now your pirate stack. So you have a freight stack which stays face up, and then you have a pirate stack which stays face down. At the very end of the game, any cards that are left in your pirate stack are going to be -1 point per card. So you want to try to keep your pirate stack small because there's other ways you're going to get pirates throughout the game as well. And if you check your hand limit and you're not over that number that's showing on the lion, then you're good. You can proceed right to step 2. You don't have to discard any cards. Once you discard down to your hand limit, now you can begin step 2, which is trading. And this is where you trade and barter with your opponents as well as buy cards into your hand. And I want to reiterate, you do not have to worry about your hand limit for the rest of your turn. So now you don't have to think about that. You can take as many cards as you need to into your hand for the rest of your turn. During the trading phase, you can buy cards, you can trade cards with your opponents, or you can trade money for cards or however you want. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but first, let's talk about buying cards. There's a couple rules for buying cards. You can buy cards from the wear stack here, from the top of the wear stack, or from the top of your own pirate stack. The cards cost 3 money each, or 3 ducats, so if you wanted to buy a card, you would just move your cube back 3 steps and purchase the top card from either the wear stack or your own pirate stack. You are limited to buying 4 cards during your entire turn. You can buy cards and then trade and then buy more cards. You can mix it up however you want, but you're only allowed to buy 4 cards max from either your pirate deck or the wear stack or some combination of the two. So buying from your pirate stack comes with lots of strategic options there, because earlier if you had to discard cards into your pirate stack, you would have a chance potentially to get those right back if you wanted to pay for them. Just remember that when you pay for cards, you're paying in victory points because your money is your points. So you really have to consider how much you really want those cards, or if they're just going to sit in your pirate stack, they're only going to lose you 1 point each at the end of the game. So you have to make those kind of decisions throughout. So to recap, you are limited to buying 4 cards per turn. Cards cost 3 ducats each to buy. If your cube ever dips below 0 and then you want to buy a card, it's going to cost you 4 ducats. So say you had 2 ducats left, you could buy a card for 3, 1, 2, 3. Then if you wanted to buy another card, you're going to have to pay 4 ducats because your cube started below 0 on that purchase. So those are just some rules to keep in mind for buying. Also during this phase, you can trade with your opponents. The rule is you can only trade with the active player. So if yellow is the active player this round, red cannot make a deal with blue. red would have to trade with yellow, and blue would have to trade with yellow, and yellow only. Now, you are never obligated to make a trade in this game, so if someone offers you a free card, you don't have to take it, but you are allowed to do that. You can say, here, would you like a free card, or would you like some money? Or you can trade cards for cards, money for cards. You can kind of do it however you want. The only rule for honesty is you have to be honest about the type of good that you are trading. So if I had like a salt card that I was trying to trade away, I can't lie and say, oh, this is olives, and then they get it and it's actually salt. That is not allowed, but you are allowed to lie about the other stuff that's on the card, like these action symbols, which we haven't talked about yet, or these crate symbols at the bottom, or the hand limit. Like you could say, this card is olives and it has a really good hand limit. And then they'd be like, yeah, I'll take it. And then they get it and it's a really bad hand limit. So you can lie about the other stuff, just not the good. Now, one thing I really like about this trading phase is the game incentivizes you to make deals. Now, when you make a deal with the active player, you're going to get a prestige tile. Now, you only get one of these per turn, no matter how many deals you make during that turn. But if you don't make a deal with the active player, you're not going to get one of these prestige tiles. It's also worth noting that the active player never receives a prestige tile during their turn. So they have to wait till they're not the active player and then try to make a deal to get a prestige tile. The reason you want these prestige tiles is there's going to be a majority style scoring mid-game and end-game. Whoever has the most, second most, and third most of these prestige tiles is going to get some points. So it's a really neat incentive here as you're watching your opponents. You're trying to keep up with them on making deals. And sometimes it's hard to come to an agreement on these deals, and then finally you'll just be like, you know what, I really want a prestige tile. Would you just take some money? Can I just gift you a free ducat? And sometimes they'll be like, sure, I'll take that. And then you get a prestige tile, which might help you get those points at that scoring time. A lot of little neat decisions revolving around the incentive to make deals in this game. So let's move on to step 3 of your turn as the active player. Once you're done making deals, you can just be like, I'm done with this. No more trades, no more deals. We're moving on to step 3. Now you have to play action cards from your hand to the table. And once again, this is only the active player doing this. You're going to play a certain number of cards based on the topmost card of your freight stack. So it's kind of like when we checked our hand limit, but now we're going to look at the bottom of this card and you'll see these little crate symbols here. However many symbols are showing, that's how many cards I must play to the table. So if there are 3 crates showing down here, I have to play 3 cards. If you don't have 3 cards, you got to go back to that trading phase and buy another card. You have to play the exact number showing. You can't play more cards, you can't play fewer cards. These cards are very easy to understand. There's 4 possible actions and every card shows 2 of those 4 in some combination or another. So you just resolve the actions from top to bottom. First here we have the ducat action, followed by the pirate flag action, followed by the card stack, followed by the ship. Now I want you to remember the numbers 1, 3, and 6 because these are going to come into play and these will help you remember these actions. The way the actions work is you just combine all the symbols on the cards that you played. So if you played 1 ducat symbol, you would just get to collect 1 ducat. If you played 2 ducat symbols, it jumps up to 3. You would collect 3 ducats. And if you played 3 or more ducat symbols, you get 6 ducats. So again, it's always 1, 3, and 6. Next, after you do the ducat action, you're going to move down to the pirate action. How many pirate flags did you play? If you played 1, then you must take on a new pirate and you draw a card from this deck here and you place it face down on your pirate stack without looking at it. If you played 2 pirate flags, you have to take on 3 pirates. And if you played 3 or more pirate flags, you have to take on 6 new pirates. And again, you draw those from the wear stack and place them directly onto your pirate stack without looking. So again, it's 1, 3, and 6. Then you move on to the next action, which is the card stack symbol. This is just drawing more cards. Once again, you play 1 symbol, you draw 1 card from the wear stack into your hand. 2 card symbols, you would draw 3 cards. 3 or more card symbols, you would draw 6 cards into your hand from this wear stack. And the last action we're going to do is the boat action. Now this one works a little bit differently because it doesn't use the 1, 3, 6 formula. This, you just count up the boat symbols that you played and you move your boat that many spaces. You have to move the exact number of spaces that are showing on your cards here. So if I played 3 boat symbols, I would have to move my boat exactly 3 spaces. You move your boat along these lines here from port to port. You are allowed to be in the same port as your opponent, so you can share spaces there, but it's important to note you are not allowed to reuse one of these shipping lanes in the same turn. So I cannot go forward and then back in the same turn. I must always progress forward, but I can choose where to branch off and things like that. When you land on one of these circular tiles, you immediately take that tile off the board and put it into your possession. I will talk more about what these tiles do here in a minute, but just know that if you land on a tile, you immediately get it. If you don't land on a tile, that might be a good thing for you. Sometimes it's not always good to land on these tiles, and I'll talk more about these in a moment. But that's how the boat action works. You just count up the number of boat symbols that you played and move your ship that many spaces. And these player reference sheets, by the way, have all this information on them. It's very easy to remember this. These player guides are really nice. So after you've taken all your actions in that order, now you proceed to step 4. This is the final step of your turn as the active player. Step 4 is called freight, which is just organizing these action cards that you just played and stacking them on top of your freight deck. Now I will explain here in a minute why you want to stack these cards in a particular order, but just know that once you commit to the order in which they're stacked, you cannot change that order, and you cannot look through this stack either. You can only ever look at the topmost card of your freight stack. So once you organize these, the topmost card, as you might have guessed, is going to determine your hand limit for your next turn as the active player, as well as how many action cards you must play on your next turn as the active player. But that's not the only reason you want to stack these cards in a certain order. And now would be a good time to learn about the different goods in this game, and those are the goods that are showing on these cards. There are 7 different goods in the game. We have jewels, scrolls, silk, salt, pottery, olives, and grain. So for an example here, I'm going to show you this salt card. If you look up here, it has a number 14. That's how many salt cards there are in the entire deck. So you can kind of get an idea of how rare the card is. And then below the salt symbol here, we have 1, 3, 6, and 10. This refers to set collection scoring. So if you had 1 salt, it would only be worth 1, 2 salts would be worth 3, 3 salts would be worth 6, and 4 salts would be worth 10 points. So how do you score these points? Well, this is where the ordering of your freight deck matters. So remember, you play those action cards, and then at the end of your turn, you have to decide the order in which you stack them on your freight deck. Thematically, this is supposed to simulate shipping these goods out on these boats. So if you think of it as grouping them together and placing them in a crate or some sort of cargo hold or something together, that's why they score. That's why they have to be in order in your freight deck. But it's important to note that they do max out. So each good has a max point value, and in order to score another set of those, you have to break them up into separate shipments. So for instance, if I had 6 salt cards, if I stacked all 6 salt cards, I would still only get 10 points if all those salt cards were in order. However, if I stacked 4 salt cards, then I put jewels on top of that, then came back in and added more salt cards, now I have a separate shipment of salt which I can score again. So if you want to maximize your points here, then ideally you would not want to ship more than the max amount in a single shipment. So with salt, I would not want to have like 7 salts stacked on top of each other. I would only want to have 4 salts, then switch to another good, then come back and add salt later. Now this is easier than it sounds because you can't always get these cards that you need, and you're also trying to think about your hand limit for next turn, because whatever card ends up on top is going to show your hand limit, as well as how many action cards you get to play on your next turn. So it's a very simple idea, but it just is agonizing to try to figure out the right order of these cards sometimes, and I really like this card stacking mechanism in this game. Now before I talk about the end of the game, I want to go over these harbor bonus tiles. If you remember during the shipping action, I said if you land on one of these, you get to collect it and place it face up in front of you. These are special abilities. You can only have 1 active tile at any given point during the game. Every time you collect a new tile, it replaces your old one. Your old one has to flip face down, and your new one stays face up in front of you. You only collect these where you end your boat movement. So if you cross over these during your boat movement, you do not collect them. You only collect the one that you end on. If you end on an empty harbor, obviously you don't get anything, and sometimes that's good because, like I said, these tokens tokens replace the one that's currently face up in front of you. So if you have one that's face up and it's really working for you, you might not want to replace it yet. So you might want to end your boat movement on an empty harbor. So you have to strategize around that. However, you are incentivized to collect a lot of these because at the end of the game, you're going to get points if you have the most, second most, or third most of these little harbor tiles. So in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about trying to get the majority of these, but at the same time, you really have to analyze the current game state. For instance, this one here says I get to ignore all pirate flags on my card. So when I play action cards, I don't have to worry about taking on pirates. If this is the only one of these tokens left out on the map, I might not be ready to give that up yet. So you really have to weigh how much that end game scoring matters to you versus how much this tile is going to help you. I really like that in this game. I really like weighing those decisions. Now let's briefly talk about what each one of these tiles does. So this one here has the ducat symbol on it. If you have this face up in front of you, this is going to add a ducat symbol to your action cards. So remember, you get like that 1, 3, 6. If you played, 2 ducat cards and you had this token, that would be like you played 3 ducat cards. So instead of just getting 3 ducats, you would actually get 6 ducats on that turn. And again, those tokens stay face up in front of you until you replace them with a new one. Now, if you have this little boat token face up in front of you, every time you play action cards with boat symbols on them, you're going to get 1 ducat per boat symbol on your cards. So if you played 3 boat symbols total this round and you had this token, then you would actually get to collect 3 ducats this round as well. And that's 3 points. So that's huge. This token here is pretty cool. This one works kind of like income. So at the beginning of your turn as the active player, you're going to take your hand limit -3 and you get that many ducats. So if I had a hand limit of 5 and I had this token active, I would get 2 ducats at the beginning of my turn. As long as I have that token active, I would be eligible for income every time I'm the active player. So that's going to complicate my decisions of which cards I put on top. I might not want to put a 3 hand limit card on the top of my freight deck if I have this token active because 3 minus 3 is 0 income. So you just have to weigh these types of decisions. This pirate flag token here, we talked about this already. This just lets you ignore all your pirate flags on your action cards. Now, it's important to note this does not count when you're discarding down to your hand limit and you have to put cards on your pirate deck. This token is not going to protect you from having to do that. This token here says you get a discount when you purchase cards. So when you're buying cards from the wear stack or from your own pirate deck, the first card you purchase is only going to cost 1 ducat. And then the second card is 2 ducats, third card is 3 ducats, and the fourth card is 4 ducats. So the third and the fourth card are not at a discount, but the first and the second card are, and that's critical, especially when you're trying to get cards out of your pirate deck so you're not losing points at the end of the game. Now the last bonus token is the compass here, and this one works a little different because you do not collect this and put it in front of you. If you end your ship movement on a compass, you remove the compass from the game, and then you're allowed to move your boat to any other harbor on the map right away, and then you would get that bonus token. So if I moved all the way over here, I could collect this bonus token, and then this one goes in front of me just like normal. The only thing is you're not allowed to move to another compass spot, and you don't have to move either. That's optional. Okay, so the only thing left to cover here in this tutorial is the scoring. How do we score points? And I want to reiterate too, your money is your points. Once again, every time you spend money in this game, you're spending points. And it sounds simple, and it's a very simple concept, but it's easy to forget as you get caught up in the flow of the game. You want to buy things, you want to get things accomplished. You have to always remember you're spending points. Every time you spend money, you're spending points. And I really, really like that. Halfway through the game, roughly, whenever that Venice card shows up, we're going to pause the game and we're going to do a mid-game scoring. The way it works is anytime a player draws the Venice card, or if they end their turn and the Venice card is showing here on the top of the stack, you interrupt the game and do a mid-game scoring. So if a player has to draw a card during their turn and it's the Venice card, they pause their turn completely. And we do this scoring and then we resume their turn after the scoring. So how does this scoring work? Well, first we look at prestige tiles. And remember, we get those from doing deals. Whoever has the most prestige tiles right now gets a payout of 6 ducats. Second most gets 3 ducats, and third most gets 1 ducat. Now, if players tie for that, they both get the full payout, and you're still eligible for a payout even if you have 0 prestige tiles. For example, if there were 4 players and 3 of them had 5 prestige tiles, everybody tied for first. They would all get 6 ducats. This player over here, however, has 0 prestige tiles, but they have the second most. They would still get the 3 ducat payout for having the second most. And that rarely happens in this game, but the rulebook does clarify that, so I wanted to cover it in the tutorial. Now, after you score these prestige tiles, they go back to the supply, so you lose them. You don't carry them over into the second half of the game. You can still earn more prestige tiles in that second half of the game, and then the end of the game, you're going to score them again, just like we did here. And we'll get to that in a second. After we score these prestige tiles, we're going to score our goods that we've stacked in our freight deck. So you're going to score everything in here except the topmost set of matching cards. So let's say my top card was salt, and then I would look underneath it and there's a salt, and then I look underneath it and there's a cloth. So these 2 salts will not get scored this round. These get set aside. These will become my freight deck for the next round of the game. But here, from here down, we're going to score all these goods. And it's very simple. You just group each set of goods separately, and anytime they're broken up by a different type of good, you treat that as a separate group. But once again, if you had more than the max amount, you only get that max score. So if I had like 8 olives stacked in a row here, I only get to score up to 5 of them. But if I had 5 olives and then they were broken up with some other good, and then I had 3 more olives over here, those are 2 separate sets of olives. So this set would score 11 points and this set would score 4 points. So again, as long as they're separated by another good type in between them, then you can score both sets of olives. After we score all these points, we just keep track up here on the ducat track with our cube. So now all the players should only have their topmost set from the previous round. All these other cards that were scored, they just go into a discard pile, and now we proceed into the second half of the game, which works exactly the same. Play continues until the last card from this where stack gets drawn. As soon as a player draws that, that triggers the end of the game. That player finishes their turn, and then each other player gets 1 more turn. So everybody has the same number of turns in this game before it ends, and if you need more cards during that last round or whatever, just use these ones that we scored from the first half of the game, just shuffle those up and make a temporary where stack to get you through to the end of the game. Alright, time for end game scoring. First, we score prestige tiles once again. We do that the same way we did during the interim scoring. You can refer back to that chapter of this video. Second, we score our freight stacks, and this is going to be scored exactly the same with one difference. Remember, during the interim scoring, we had to take off the topmost set of goods and carry those over into the next round. We didn't score that topmost set. In the final scoring, we'll score all the sets of goods within our freight stack, and you can refer back to the interim scoring section of this video to learn how to score your sets of goods. Next, everybody counts the pirate cards in their pirate deck, and that's just -1 ducat per card in your pirate deck. Very easy. And the last part of final scoring is your harbor bonus tiles. These score exactly the same as the prestige tiles. So if you have the most harbor bonus tiles, you're going to get 6 ducats, second most tiles gets 3 ducats, and third most gets 1 ducat. Once again, if multiple players tie for that, everybody gets the full payout, and you are eligible for a payout if you have 0 tiles collected throughout the game, which is very unlikely. And that's the final scoring. As you score these points, you want to keep track on the ducat track up here, and then at the end, the player with the most ducats is the winner. If multiple players are tied for first place, you look at whoever has the biggest freight stack. They're going to be the winner, and if there's still a tie, it's whoever among them has more where groupings within their freight stack. And that, my friends, is how you play OLTRE MARE. Now let me tell you what I think of it. I have this game rated an 8 out of 10. I'm not always in the mood for negotiation games. I really like Chinatown. That's probably my favorite in this genre. But I would not compare OLTRE MARE to Chinatown whatsoever. OLTRE MARE has its own feel, its own unique identity, and that's what I like about it. It stands alone. One of my absolute favorite parts of this game is probably the simplest idea of them all, and that is your money is your victory points. It's such a simple idea, but it just complicates your decisions because every time you want to accomplish something, you have to think, is that worth spending my victory points to do that? It's something everybody can kind of grasp from the get-go, and it just makes the decisions so much more fun because every time you do something, you're spending points. I love that. Another thing I really enjoy in this game is that card stacking mechanism. You're weighing like 4 different things. You're weighing your goods, like the order in which you stack your goods. You're also weighing your hand limit for your next turn, and also how many action cards you're going to get to play on your next turn. And then a little deeper than that, you have to decide when to abandon the route that you're on and go to a different good. You know, if you have like 3 out of 4 salts, you need that 4th salt to get a complete set. But in your hand, you're sitting with 2 jewels. And it's like, that's a complete set of jewels right there. That's 5 points. So maybe you just abandon salt and go ahead and stack those jewels and not worry about getting that full set of salt, even though you're missing out on some points there. Lots of great decisions. I love those types of decisions in games, and this one does it really well. And last but not least, I really like how the game incentivizes you to make deals. There's a lot of negotiation games out there, but not a lot of them really give you that incentive to make a deal. Sometimes I feel like, why am I making deals here? Why do I want to help my opponent? Well, in OLTRE MARE, I want to help my opponent because I want to get that prestige tile and I want to get that bonus payout during mid-game and end-game scoring. There's some really good decisions there, and I love how the game incentivizes the trading aspect. The last thing I want to mention, the first time I played this game, I felt like the boat section of the board was sort of detached. You know, it felt like a card game with just this board out there for no reason. But the more I played the game, the more I understood how important those bonus tokens are to collect, you know, when to collect which ones, and how to use those to accomplish your goals more efficiently. Once you realize the importance of those tiles, you're thinking, you know, do I want to keep this tile in front of me and continue to use it the way I'm using it? Or do I want to get another tile and kind of switch my plans up a little bit? And then maybe I'll contend for that end game scoring of having the most tiles collected. So that's OLTRE MARE. Again, it's not the best game ever, but this is the epitome of the type of game I love to feature on this channel. I think a lot of you out there will get some enjoyment out of this, especially because as of now, you can find this game for pretty cheap on the secondhand market. Obviously, that can always change. I got this game for 15 bucks and it was worth every penny. So let me know in the comments, have you ever played OLTRE MARE? Have you ever played any games by this designer, Emanuele Ornella? He has a couple other games that I'm familiar with, and I'm probably going to feature them on future videos actually, so I won't go into those, but I would love to know, have you ever played this? What's your favorite negotiation game? What's your favorite bartering and trading game? I love reading all your comments, so keep those coming. Share this video with all your board gaming friends so they can also learn about undiscovered games. We're on this journey together to discover the undiscovered. That's what this channel is all about. If you want to support the channel further, there is a digital tip jar in the description below. It's just a PayPal link. You can donate any amount you like. That just helps me keep the lights on and motivates me to continue to make videos. But my biggest motivation is seeing my subscribers go up. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. That's the best way to help the channel. And if I made any mistakes, make sure you check the description below. That's where I will post any clarifications or things like that. But for now, I'm going to go drink some herbal tea because my voice is about to give out. Thanks for watching. I will see you on the next video with another undiscovered game.